Tartarus at the moment we died. There's many other topics on this story that I can just continue to go on that have been preached about this particular story. I'd like for you to know as we look at this that I would like to talk this morning that it's a lesson on the proper use of riches. If you're looking at the screen up here, it says in Luke 16:13, no servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other, but you cannot serve God and mammon. Now mammon here is translated money in the ESV, if you happen to have that particular translation with you. It is called basically mammonos. Mammonos. Probably it is an Aramaic term related to the Hebrew term aman, which means to trust. When we think about the definition here, we're thinking about riches because the word means wealth and riches. In fact, Jesus replies to the mockery of the covetous Pharisees in Luke 16:14 through 15. He says, now the Pharisees who were lovers of money also heard all these things, and they derided him, expressed contempt for, or ridicule is what that means by the word deride. And he said to them, you are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your hearts. For what is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God. That word abomination, we have seen that in the Old Testament before. Now we're seeing it here addressed in the New Testament. And that word abomination, it basically means disgust or hatred. So if we were to read this again, it would say what is highly esteemed among men is disgusting and hatred in the sight of Almighty God. Also, I want you to know that this particular story here that you see, this has been called by many a parable, but it's different. It's not like a regular parable because basically, as a parable, it is basically associated with real characters. Real characters such as Abraham and Lazarus and this certain rich man. Many people believe, and I'm laying a little bit to the fact that I believe that this is a real story by Jesus, that this is not basically a parable, because this is looking at what's called real life with real people who have real names, and I don't believe that Jesus would have used these names if they weren't associated as being real. It also talks about, this story is about real consequences. And I believe it is a warning that is appropriate for all of us that we need to make sure that at the time that we come to our death, that we are ready. In fact, it does not matter whether it's regarded as a parable or not. The fact is that this was taught by Jesus, and it remains the same of how he presented it, whether it is a parable or not. Have you ever thought about what happens when you die? Have you ever thought about, will there be consequences for us when we die? Are we going to be aware of what is really going on around us? And are we going to have any feelings whatsoever once that we're no longer in this body? I believe that this story is going to give us here a glimpse of the unseen world, and I believe it will refute many false doctrines in this story. So let's look at point one this morning as we look at the characteristics of the rich man before his death. In Luke 16:19 says there was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. Notice that he's clothed in purple and fine linen. Man, we're talking about probably partying every day. We're talking about fun every day. Probably didn't care about anyone but himself. It also says that he fared sumptuously every day. That sumptuous, luxurious living, filthy rich, living splendidly, living magnificently in his life of sumptuous living. He probably was an honored man, because I don't find anything in the passages here that say that he was accused of being dishonest in how he got his riches. Does not say he was dishonest in how he got his riches. But he did use riches, not in a proper way. He basically used possessions for himself. He used it to satisfy his own lust. In fact, if you will look at 1 John 3 and 17, but whoso hath this world's goods, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? That's in the New King James Version. But whoever has this world's goods, and sees his brother in need, and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? In Proverbs 21 and 13, whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. Man, that's an interesting passage. Whoever stops the ears of the cry for the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. There are many that feel that not doing bad is enough just to please God. But look at James 4 and 17. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. And in James 1 and 27, pure religion and undefiled before God my Father is to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Number 2, let's look at the characteristics of Lazarus before his death. In Luke 16:20, there was a certain beggar. Do you see this there? There was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores. Verse 21, and desired to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sore. I'm talking about this certain beggar here. The word Lazarus is abbreviated form of Eleazar, which basically means God help. And this was common among the Jews. But here we have on the slide, we have a beggar here that's in poverty. Where's he laying? He's laying at the gate. It doesn't say that he had any friends, so maybe he was without friends. And then it talks about this particular sick man. And what is he? He's full of sores. Even the dogs, it says, licked his sores. So helpless, he couldn't even run away from the dogs. That's how helpless he was. And the only medical attention that this poor, helpless, hopeless man here had was from the dogs that came up and licked his sores. There was more kindness from the dogs than there was from this rich man. Think about that. And then it also says, desiring to be fed with the crumbs for the rich man's table. He's hungry. He wanted only the crumbs. The rich man, the rich would clean their hands by wiping on chunks of bread. I don't know if you know that, but they would basically cleanse their hands by wiping on chunks of bread to basically cleanse themselves. He was humble and was only asking for the bare necessities of life. Just give me that bread or those crumbs that fall from you, rubbing your hands on that bread to help you prepare for you being able to eat your food. He only asked for the crumbs basically from so much abundance that this rich man had. And we do not prove our care for the poor by giving them the crumbs. The garbage we are throwing away. You know, I've been to the Golden Corral, and I've seen people pile up their plates sky high, and then go back and get some more, and don't even eat all the food that they got on their plate. And I asked one of the guys, managers there, about a year ago, I said, could that food that these people don't eat, have you ever thought about maybe trying to give it to people that are hungry? He said, the government won't let us do that. We have to throw it away. Think about the things that are thrown away because basically We need to care more for the poor than just our crumbs. You see, that's all he wanted. He just wanted some crumbs that fell from that rich man's table. I'm talking about the poor. I'm talking about the sick. I'm talking about the hungry. Do you know of a passage of Scripture over in the New Testament where Jesus addressed the poor, the sick, and the hungry? I was naked and you didn't clothe me. I was sick and you didn't take care of me. When did you see me like this? When did I see those people like that? He said, well, you did to the least of these. You did it unto me. Let's look at the two men in death. At death, their destinies are sealed. I want that to sink in this morning. At death, their destinies are sealed. And our destinies are sealed when we die. When you think about our relationship with God was not changed by death. Their relationship at all was not changed by death. They still died. But their relationship with God, even though it wasn't changed at death, there's some consequences that came from this. In Revelation 21:11, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. We're talking about at the burial now. What happened at the burial concerning these two men here? Now, no doubt, the rich man, he was basically buried with great honor. He had great ceremony. He was what we call, he was put away well. But you think about Lazarus. Had no impressive burial or funeral, even had one. In fact, it was normal for the condition that he was in to be picked up and taken out to a place called Gehenna and thrown into the pit where all the others that could not afford a burial were taken and just cast into this place over here where everybody else was cast. You see, basically did not cease to exist. But death was not the end. Because think about these men here. Each one of them, after they died, what were they? They were conscious. Each one after they died, they were rational. Lazarus at death, how was he carried away to Abraham's bosom or to his side? He was carried here by the angels to that place. But what about the rich man? Does it talk about he was carried by anybody to where he went? No, it says the rich man lifted up his eyes in Hades, and he was in a lot of pain. He was in torment. Because what was this? This was their final abode, the final place that they were going to be. Where was Lazarus? He's in a place called paradise, called a place of rest. Not heaven, but a place of rest. Also a place that was waiting for a deliverer to come and to get them. The rich man here was in Hades, and the rich man still had brothers on earth. He still had brothers on earth. Let's look for just a moment about the men after death. What could they do? They could remember. They could remember, for it says in Luke 16:25, but Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted, and you are tormented. Do you see that in the verse there? Remember about your life on earth and how you lived it. But what's happened to Lazarus? Lazarus is comforted. It says in Luke 16:23-25, the last part there, now he is comforted. He is in a place of rest. The other one is in a place of torment. And then in Luke 16:23 it says, and being in torments in Hades, he lifted his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. You know how many times I have read this particular verse here, and verse 24? But But now I see a little connection here. The rich man's in torment, right? He wants him to send Lazarus, right? He wants him to send him so that he can do what? He wants him to send him so that he can dip his finger in water and cool my... You know, I just had to think about that a minute. If just dipping a little bit of water on the tip of his finger could cool his tongue, what if he'd been dipped all over with the water? Is that a message said that Jesus was trying to say? Let me tell you what you got to do down the line. If you want to protect yourself, you better have the water and the blood on you. In Luke 16:27 it says, and he said, I beg you therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house. He offered two petitions. He offered one for himself and the other for his brothers. And what did he want to do here? He wanted God to hear him, but in life, he refused to hear God. Now, this is important, folks. Now he is in a position where now I want to hear what God, I want God to hear me. While I was on earth, he didn't want to hear what God had to say. And after death, he knew he was lost, and he did not want his family to be lost. After death, his prayer was unanswered. That's important. His prayer was unanswered that he was praying after he had left the body. He also was selfish in life. He was also told that there's a great gulf between us. I can't come to you, and you can't come to me. You see, the Lord has chosen living men to warn them about what's going to happen after we die. For we're told in 2 Corinthians 4:7, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels. And after death, the rich man might have repented, but it was just too late. When I think about this story up until this time right now, I think about what we have covered and gone through. We have looked at two different people. We've looked at one that is poor and laid at a gate to try to get food to live. We look at another man who had everything, anything he could want, and now he is suffering because he did not do his responsibilities that God felt he should have done with the things that he had. Now, Lazarus did not get to Abraham's bosom because he was just poor. He had to have gotten there because God saw some good in him that allowed him to go to paradise. But he did not see the good in the rich man that could have got him in paradise. It got him in a place called Tartarus, where he is suffering and in pain. I believe that this story up to this point is to tell us that we need to make sure that as we're living our life every single day, that we are thinking about others instead of ourselves. That we are focusing on the needs of others instead of ourselves. That it's not about us, it's about him. And we are his hands, we are his feet, we are his legs. We're the ones that have to do what he is asking us to do. And we have to do those things. And if we don't do those things, then we're going to suffer because we did not obey the word of the Lord. Will you remember when you die? Will you be aware of where you are? If you don't get to where you thought you were going to be, are you going to be in the same shape as the rich man was, wishing that you could get your family saved and get them to where they need to be because you don't want them coming to that place that you're at? You see, that's why the story of Jesus is so important, because he came to seek and to save the lost, and he came to give us the avenue, the roadmap, the pathway, so that we can get not to paradise, but to heaven. It's all been stand and let's sing this song.